Ever get that feeling, like when your brain's stuck on fast forward and your stomach's doing a drum solo?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know that feeling.
That's anxiety for you, and it's something a lot of us deal with, right?
Definitely a universal experience.
So we're diving into this today with Introduction to Anxiety, this guide from Therapist Aid LLC.
Oh, good one.
It's got all these prompts for self-reflection, which I'm a little terrified of, to be honest,
Yeah.
but hey, that's what we're here for, right? To
Yeah.
unpack this whole anxiety thing together.
Exactly. And I think it's important to start with this idea that anxiety gets a bad rap sometimes.
How so?
Well, it's often painted as this purely negative thing, but think about it. Imagine our ancestors hanging out, way back when. A little anxiety about a saber-toothed tiger lurking in the bushes probably kept a few of them alive.
Okay, that's a good point. So it's not all bad.
Right. It's actually hardwired into us for a reason.
Makes sense. And speaking of definitions, this guide defines anxiety as, and I'm reading here, the body's response to situations interpreted as threatening.
I like that definition. It emphasizes that it's all about perception.
Right. Like what feels threatening to one person might not even register for someone else.
Exactly. And sometimes, like with that saber-toothed tiger example, a little bit of threat detection is a good thing.
Totally. It's like, imagine driving on the highway with absolutely zero anxiety. You might end up taking risks you wouldn't even think about otherwise.
Exactly. That's where this whole anxiety curve concept comes in. Think of it like a dial. A little anxiety can be beneficial. It helps us focus, stay sharp, but crank that dial up too high, and suddenly it becomes this big roadblock.
It's all about finding that sweet spot, right?
Exactly.
Now, one of the things this guide asks us to think about is, are you ready for this? Our anxiety triggers. There's specific things that really set us off. And, full disclosure, public speaking. Big one for me. Big one.
Public speaking is definitely up there for a lot of people.
But I'm curious, like from your experience, what are some of the other common triggers you've come across?
Oh, there are so many. But honestly, it varies so much from person to person. Yeah. Social situations are a big one for some, parties, meeting new people, that kind of thing. Work deadlines, relationship issues, really anything your brain perceives as a threat.
And it's amazing how our brains, they don't just stop at, oh, this is a little nerve-wracking. Suddenly we're catapulted into, this is a 5-alarm fire. And it's not just in our heads either. This guide dives into the physical side of anxiety too. It asks, what are 3 physical symptoms you experience when you feel anxious?
Oh, the mind-body connection is so powerful.
Right. It's like for me, my heart starts racing, my palms get sweaty. It's almost like my body is getting ready to run a marathon when all I have to do is like send an email.
It's like our body is channeling that inner superhero, except instead of a cape and tights, we get the racing heart and the sweaty palms.
Wow.
And, for our ancestors, those physical symptoms, they were actually super useful. It's that fight or flight response kicking in. It helped them escape danger. But these days, that same response can be triggered by, like you said, an email, a traffic jam.
It's incredible, isn't it, how our bodies haven't quite caught up to our modern lives.
Exactly.
And the mental side of anxiety, that can be just as intense as the physical stuff, right? I mean, the racing thoughts, the worries, constantly picturing the worst case scenario. This guide, it really highlights how much anxiety can hijack our thoughts.
Absolutely. It's like our inner critic gets a megaphone and just won't be quiet.
The worst.
And it's easy to get caught in that cycle of negative thoughts. That's why this source's emphasis on coping mechanisms is so important.
So important, because how do we deal with it? How do we dial down the anxiety when it starts to spiral? What are some of the techniques that you've found helpful?
Well, the good news is there are so many healthy ways to manage anxiety.
Oh, good.
One that I find really powerful, and it sounds so simple, is deep breathing.
Deep breathing. Okay. Like in through the nose, out through the mouth. We've all heard that one.
Right, but it's more than just taking a deep breath. It's about being intentional. Imagine you're inflating a balloon in your belly with each inhale and then slowly releasing it with each exhale. It's amazing how such a simple technique can really shift your body's state.
Huh. I like that. I'm definitely going to be picturing that balloon next time I feel that familiar panic starting to rise.
I think you'd be surprised how effective it can be.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about how anxiety is kind of this leftover survival mechanism from our ancestors, how it can be both helpful and a pain, literally, and how it affects us both physically and mentally. But most importantly, we've talked about how there are healthy ways to manage it.
Exactly. And I think the biggest takeaway here is you are not alone in this.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a universal human experience.
So well said.
But here's something to ponder. If your anxiety could talk, What would it be trying to tell you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Something to think about, right?
Yeah.
As you continue on this journey of understanding and managing your anxiety.
I love that. Food for thought, everyone. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break, but stick around because when we come back, we'll be diving even deeper into this with more from Introduction to Anxiety.